right, now that I'm done munching, let's get started with the March 2024 OpenZFS leadership meeting. Saw a bunch of items on the agenda. See, the first one is a question about ZFS encryption and, what's the state of it? I know some of the original developers that worked on it are not active in the project anymore. They're asking specifically about versions 2.1.15 and 2.2.3 and kind of what's the state of it? Does it work well? Are there bugs? Is it going to get fixed soon? Anybody have opinions on that?
In supporting it in the field, we've seen a couple of reports of being able to construct a send stream that once you receive it acts a bit weird and things like that. Not anything too bad that we've been able to dig into and investigate. And then, we've got a pull request we're working on where there was one case where it looks like the ARC buffer was getting freed incorrectly when it was in an anonymous state, where we assumed during the anonymous state there were only one consumer of it or whatever, but there were actually, I think, two buffs, both the raw and the decrypted buffer, and it was being freed too soon. But it looks like most of that is solved now. So, we do see occasional bug reports, but none that we've really been able to track down to something solid yet. And we're working on a couple of very specific bug cases. The one was null pointer dereferences in the decompressed code, and that one I think is solved now, and that's the pull request. And then we're also been looking at one where I think something to do with an embedded block or something, although there shouldn't be embedded blocks with encryption, but when you receive a stream, sometimes the pool will suspend when we try to allocate a 0-byte block because you don't allocate 0-byte blocks. And so the allocator returns space, and the pool's like, well, we shouldn't be out of space. We have lots of space, right? We make sure there's space before we commit something to a transaction group. So that leads to a suspend, but nothing, the suspend is annoying, but not dangerous. Anything outside of that, we've not been able to catch.
So there was one whole class of like kernel bugs that kept causing crashes. You think most of those are resolved?
I don't know. The one set that was the null pointer dereference, I think that is solved, but the rest of them I've not ever been able to get a reproduction case or something to investigate specifically. I just know that the support cases that I've worked on were the one around send receive causing a suspend, and the other one was the null dereference that we have the pull request to fix.
Okay, I'm not the one that asked the question.
Well, I could just add to Alan that I also had some replication tickets from Tronas about encrypted replications. There was something with properties and keys somewhere in the process, but I don't think we were able to reproduce it. Otherwise, I don't have any significant number of issues reported or panics or anything, not more than any other area. But I do know that there are a number of people who are screaming and yelling on every opportunity, so there may be cases, I guess. But yeah, there was some work on it in 2.2.3 just to simplify some code. I removed separate allocations for encrypted buffers in ARC, separate from full size. That also should have fixed some potential races. Just easy is better. That's all I know about it. So like if there are some issues, there should be some tickets, no, some issues on GitHub, but honestly, I haven't searched for them lately. If there are some, not addressed, sorry.
Yeah, I know there's quite a few issues there, although a lot of them are lacking enough information to try to reproduce. I think there are one or two that do have enough information. I just haven't had time to dig into them. I have a list somewhere from Rich Mercolani had curated a couple of the ones that were easier to reproduce. So if someone is interested in digging into these, they should probably pipe up on the Slack, and we'll make sure the list gets routed to them. As far as the question, which I think is, in what version is it expected to be production ready? I think that's more of a judgment to the user than something we can say per se, right?
Yeah, I agree. Looks like the next agenda items are these PRs. First one is fast dedup.
Yeah, so that's a big series of PRs. The first one has been merged. The second one, Alexander has finished reviewing and accepted. I just need a second one so then that one can merge. And then we're working through the next set of them.
Cool.
I just like to add that I reviewed a few more after that accepted, and I was hoping for some comments on my comments.
Yes, we will get review feedback taken care of on I know the quota one you did and a couple of the other ones after that as well. And so we'll keep working through those as well.
Cool.
But I think zap shrinking is one I know other people are waiting on for, not the dedup use case even. So it'll be nice to have that land. So if somebody wanted to volunteer to take a look at that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would like to. I hope to find time to. Can't guarantee that I will though. But I have on my list of things I'd like to take a look at. Looks like your next one is zinject. Maybe this is not yours, but from Rob.
Yeah, this is just some improvements to zinject so that when you're listing the injections you have, it can list the different types, especially as we continue adding more types to test more situations.
Cool. Looks like you got another review in the past day. So you have 2 reviewers now, so that's good. The next one, single file scrubbing.
Yes, so this is a feature to basically scrub a particular file. Basically works as if that file got added to the error list, and then lets you reuse that machinery, but basically scrub a whole file, which is different than just reading the file because it actually checks the parity, force check of the parity as well.
Yeah.
So especially if there's a big file or a file that encountered an issue at some point, being able to scrub that specific file and make sure it's good kind of fits in with the previous pull request we had that we're still working on review feedback for, which was being able to scrub all blocks born in a specific time range. The initial pull request you had to specify transaction group, but we are most of the way through building a mechanism to keep kind of like a round robin database of transaction group to wall clock, so that when you can specify, scrub everything that's changed in the last 6 hours, and it can figure out an approximate transaction group range for that and scrub it. So that it'll have a more user-friendly interface.
Cool. At one point there was an idea around like scrubbing specific data sets, but that never got integrated, did it?
Not that I recall.
Okay. That might have just been like some prototype that we had at Delphix. And then it looks like the last one is JSON.
Yeah, so this is a new kstat that lets you get the data that you would normally get from like zpool status as JSON. The advantage of doing it via the kstat there is you don't have to acquire the SPA namespace lock in order to turn the SPA name into the SPA T. And so it lets you do that without having to acquire the lock, which, you know, if something else is holding the lock means you can still find the status, especially where cases where, you know, if your metric system is going to run this command every 60 seconds to check the status of the pool, having those, you know, if something does hold the SPA namespace lock for a while due to a problem or just taking a long time, like a pool import that takes half an hour, then you get no status information until that lock is finally released. And you also get all those processes, which are unkillable because they're sleeping in the kernel, just laying around on your system.
Yeah, very annoying. So this mechanism, because you're going through proc, SPL, kstat, and then like the name of the pool, that kind of already has
Like
the
a
spot key.
Yeah, it has
Not going
access to the SPA T without having to look it up.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it does it as JSON, so it's easier. Like, you know, we've all, I'm sure, been fed up with trying to parse zpool status.
Yeah.
To get metrics out of it.
To what degree is the format of the JSON output like? Can people rely on that not changing?
That's something we would like to address as part of the review, is making sure that anything that's not there that people want is done, so that once it's in there, it's not going to change much. I think there's a couple of chunks of it that are conditional on, you know, your pool a little bit. But
looks like this is kind of the whole config. So you're getting a lot of internal state here, like, you know, VS scan removing false. It's like, you know, is that something that really, like, if it's not documented for sure.
Yeah, what that means. Yeah, I guess for the other thing, we should look at the docs we wrote for this and get a man page version of them so that people could know what's what.
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff, at least like the config, I mean, it's stored on disk, so presumably it's not going to be changing, you know, nilly-willy. So that does make it seem like a reasonable thing to rely on. You know, there may be some things where the formatting or whatever is not wonderful. I'm not seeing any stuff here, but like I'm thinking like properties where you may have like a number there, and really it would be nice if it was like the name of the value. I don't know.
Like any that are like an enum.
Yeah. I don't know if that's actually the case here. Just kind of scanning through. So there's SPA props. These are all like byte counts, kind of.
But I imagine that a case that isn't covered in should be just, even if there isn't any properties that are actually an enum right now. Because I think actually max dnode size, I think, might actually be an enum.
Okay.
It's just that all of the values are integer sizes, and we're giving the right value, but it might be a good example to make sure that this can handle an enum.
I mean, it looks like a lot of these are like, so for example, like scan stats.
Right, or the like VDEV state is definitely
been stringified, which is, I think, probably the right thing to do. Even though obviously like the enum values are kind of committed since they put it down this format, but certainly easier to deal with the strings, right?
Yep. And so, yeah, like things like the VDEV stat or state and a couple others, we definitely do translate those from the enums into strings.
All right, cool.
But yeah, like the state of the VDEV being healthy versus degraded versus etc.
Those
Unavailable.
strings.
It's
Yeah.
not directly related to kstat, but you mentioned need to parse the pool status output. I was actually asked by our middleware team many times, like when we see some the pool output that parsable. It's just, I understand you've done it on kernel side, but would be nice to have like something like that done in user space too.
I mean, maybe we could have zpool status -j or -json actually just like get it from proc spl kstat. I mean, the problem is that's like Linux specific. But I guess you could, repurpose some of that code. Is the JSONification stuff Linux specific, or is that like some library that we're linking with?
It's a small library that Fred wrote. Or not library, like single C file that we can compile in.
Cool.
Kstat should be available on FreeBSD too. I hope
Yep.
it works there too.
I don't know that we've tested that yet, but we would. And yes, the idea is that you'd be able to hit the kstat. It looks like it is hooked up. So yeah, you'd be able to get this by just the ctl kstat.zfs stat pool name dot status or whatever.
Cool. Yeah, that seems like a great future addition to this.
Yeah, well, especially like to Alexander's point there for TrueNAS GUI and so on, especially when we added new things like we have in brackets resilvering beside a VDEV. That's been around for a while, but initializing, and then there's another one for removing now, and a bunch of those, and it makes it really hard to parse the human readable text there. So having something in JSON is really nice, and especially getting a little more state about the VDEV states and the sizes and so on. And then another one that's coming that I thought it was already up, but I guess maybe George can talk a little bit about it as well, is parallel pool import. So being able to import multiple pools concurrently, especially
that's on my to-do list. So I'm trying to get one more PR integrated, and then that PR should be coming. So I'll rebase it with the latest changes.
Great. And then once that's there, we also will do parallel export. So being able to export multiple pools more quickly, especially when people are doing things like HA with multiple pools, it's, there's no reason to be doing them one at a time, especially when it can take a while. And as part of that, we will probably also be looking at asynchronously freeing the ARC. So if you export a pool, not having to block the return of that IOCTL on having freed, gigs and gigs of memory in the ARC. Again, with the idea that HA failover can be faster that way.
Cool.
I think that's the majority of what we've got going on.
Cool. Looks like Alexander's just adding another item to the agenda. Speculative prefetch.
Oh yes, I saw that when I was looking at the pull requests.
Yeah, I just created pull requests yesterday or a couple of days ago. Just for a long time, it was annoying that prefetcher can't do its job if requests are not in order. That happens quite often for any multi-threaded server. And just I made a patch to try to handle that. Don't have performance numbers yet, but my synthetic test shows that it can handle reorders. So would be interesting to hear if anybody have ideas maybe how to improve it even further. But yeah, hopefully I will have some real world tests soon. Meanwhile, just thoughts are welcome.
Yeah, I mean, just intuitively, like you said, when you have a multi-threaded iSCSI and so on, I'd expect this to make a reasonably big difference.
Yeah, on FreeBSD, in FreeBSD SCSI, I explicitly made requests depend on each other slightly to separate them in time to reduce reorder. But now on Linux, we have it on full throttle iSCSI, SMB, NFS, and pretty bad. So I hope this to help all of them together. But now when this patch allows some slack, like if some requests arrive not exactly in point but close, it will be handled differently. I'm wondering what if that request is not part of a stream? It should not be handled differently, but create a new stream. But I don't know how to detect that. What requests are part of that stream, or just were happening nearby. That's my biggest thought reminding about it. I don't know what to do about it, but otherwise, I hope it to be pretty nice.
Am I reading right that you have this heuristic of like stuff that's 4 megabytes ahead is considered like part of this stream, and if it's not in that range, then it's a new stream?
Yeah. So it's not hard-coded for megabytes. I use it tunable for minimum prefetch distance, which is 4 megabyte. So but I hope more or less it should be true, but again, it's not exactly obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that something like that could work pretty well most of the time. I mean, of course, you're going to have a lot of heuristics when it comes to speculative prefetching. So it doesn't seem too bad to have another one here. What additional agenda items would folks like to discuss today?
I have a quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it was good to talk to Alan and Rob and Pavel in Taipei about the upcoming event, be it a cookie cutter developer summit or something broader. I just made a survey this last few minutes that I'll drop in chat, and I can drop in Slack, which is about the notion of having it in Portland, Oregon, of all places, where I know there are some local participants in the community. And as in many discussions that have taken place beginning at the last developer summit, this form, yeah, okay, thank you. I'm new to forms and such. Let me clicky.
Yeah, just to give some context to other folks.
Yeah. Let me get permissions straightened out.
Organize the next OpenZFS Developer Summit. So with that, he's taking a look at where we should have it, what the format should be, and some of those things might be the same or similar, and some might be different. So look forward to seeing what you come up with, Michael.
Thank you. While I try to find the permissions, which are not kind of where they are in other Google Doc features, give me a sec here, like maybe under share, cancel, nope, send. That said, it seems that over half the participants are traveling, such that, well, flying to the Bay Area or flying to Portland is a toss-up. I do have a well-sized community center at my disposal that has a brand new sound system, and I'm working on a new internet system and can rig up something as needed, such that there's not a hotel super nearby, but I could investigate local, both Airbnb or shuttles and all that. And overall, this could be pulled off for a lot less than downtown San Francisco, to state the obvious, and could get creative with things like food trucks for food or catering, of which we do routinely for other events. So if you're game, I'm game, but I do want to pull your feedback on this. So you'd think our friends at Google would make this easy. Any forms experts here? I'm not seeing permissions whatsoever. Goodness, pre-filter.
Done it before.
You may have to do this at like your as the admin user. Sometimes if you're running your own like Google domain, then it might be a permission set by, you know, from the admin site versus the user itself.
For the whole organization before the user has the ability to control it.
Got it. Okay, so I will get you that form. It might be a different URL. I'll drop it in Slack, and it's just a high level poll. For example, one participant has a company meetup in October. That's either the first week or the second week. They'll know this week of when it will be, and we'd love to have their participation. So simple stuff like that. It's pretty. The questions are the city, a choice of the 19th or 26th as weekends. Would user content be attractive to you? Would you like to participate? Your contact information as appropriate if you want to participate, and your ideas. So I'll shoot that out hopefully in the next hour or two, and thank you so much. And on a technical front, I had a great chat with you, Alan, and Rob about just some ideas for safety belts on either pool import or very gentle soft read-only status or export if you lose redundancy. So we'll keep brainstorming that.
Yeah, Michael's idea there was possibly a setting to basically automatically suspend the pool when your available redundancy gets too low. So for example, if you have a RAID Z3 and you lose 2 or 3 of your disks, to suspend the pool to hopefully prevent operating with, you know, no redundancy where the next disk is going to fault the pool and lose a bunch of data.
Or read-only mode.
Yeah, or read-only or something to partly deal with the case where people aren't monitoring their pools correctly, but also just to, you know, if things are not in a healthy state to stop and get attention rather than continue working, even though, you know, while ZFS is able to keep working, it might not be your policy to try to keep working in that situation.
And inversely, the idea came from pool import, where if for whatever reason you're importing with zero redundancy, it would be really good to warn like crazy, because sometimes that's just an administrative, you know, devices turned off for a silly reason or otherwise, such that you set levels of, you know, how YOLO you want to go. So we'll keep exploring that idea, and maybe we should formalize it in a doc or something. I don't know. Okay. And it appears the presentations in Taipei were recorded, so Alan and Rob's presentation should be up.
And Pavel's
at some point. And Pavel's, yes.
That'll probably be a little bit before those are posted, though.
It traditionally is. One topic that stood out is that block cloning benefits are lost on Send, which was not clear to me based on everything I've read to date. And we brainstormed briefly during his talk of like, well, what could be done short of just turning on deduplication at the receiving end? If hopefully the great minds can come together and figure out if there's a clever way to preserve the benefits throughout the entire workflow, whenever that's appropriate. That's all I've got.
Cool. I will look for the link in Slack to your survey about the next OpenZFS DevSummit. Other topics for today.
I don't know if this is necessarily the best place to ask, but I was wondering, does anyone have especially useful use cases for Sendfile, the system call on Linux or FreeBSD with ZFS? That is offloading, you know, reading a file and sending it to the socket, on those operating systems. I know like Samba can use this to avoid using as much CPU and user space, and web servers like Nginx use it, and so on. But basically closer to zero copy for ZFS. I was going through an old Solaris PSARC post about how it would work there, and looking at making it work in modern ZFS, which is basically loaning an arc buff out to the kernel.
Well, as you have told, Samba supports it, and that should probably be interesting for us. It's just I wonder how it be possible, how much it be possible to implement without integrating with buffer cache, page cache, or whatever. Like to whom that buffer should be loaned.
Mm-hmm.
What are the interfaces there? At some point, we were looking on integration from perspective of IOU ring, but we haven't found it particularly useful. No, like realistic. Not it could be useful, but not so much realistic to implement. So yeah, some integration would be good potentially.
Yeah. But yeah, if
Also,
anybody has a special use case for it, I'd love to hear more about it. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say from the same perspective of integration, still question of balance between page cache versus arc size. On FreeBSD, buffer cache always wins and ZFS shrinks to the ground, but it's a bit orthogonal to your question.
Well, if you're using right now, if you use Sendfile, it ends up getting copied to the buffer cache, and you A, double cache, and B, like you said, it will shrink the arc. If Sendfile worked the way it's meant to, and we kind of loaned the buffer, that would ideally prevent that. Sorry about the fire alarm.
Yeah, I just wonder, okay, we loaned it, so ZFS can no longer free it. It's in debuff cache, but we can only see and hope that page cache will evict it.
So the way it works is when Sendfile's done, like, as soon as Sendfile's used the page and send it out the network, it'll call a callback to return it to the arc. So ideally, it'd be loaned out for a very short amount of time.
Return to the arc, not to page cache.
Correct.
Like, is there interfaces with going around page cache but still allowing to loan buffers? No, sure. I saw them from ZFS side years ago, but I never saw it integrated into anything.
Got a prototype for FreeBSD and Linux. And so on FreeBSD, it has a Sendfile VOP, and yeah, you give it to Sendfile, it uses it, and then when it's done with it, when it's no longer being used by the mbuf, it calls back and we return it directly to the arc, and so it doesn't end up in the page cache that way, and we don't pin the buffer in the arc for a really long time. It's just basically while it's in the socket buffer, it's loaned out from the arc, but as soon as the socket buffer is done with it, it goes back to the arc.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd definitely be interested to save some memory copy there, because we do have a lot of bottlenecks in Samba, especially it's in processes that are copying data from network socket to its local buffers to then give to ZFS.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could skip those, it would be great.
Yeah, and there's the whole other side we haven't looked at yet of receive file, where, you know, the application can get an anonymous arc buffer from ZFS, fill it with data, and then give it to ZFS without doing the trip through user space for writes. Right. That's all I have for that.
Somebody has added long text to agenda.
So the question's about like when there's memory pressure, the ARC doesn't respond quickly enough to freeing memory.
Is this specifically on Linux?
I think so. I'm not sure.
I don't know if there's how an alias, some of it on Linux is, but on FreeBSD there's a setting, a ZFS tunable that if the amount of free memory outside of ZFS drops to a certain level, it'll trigger shrinking the ARC sooner, even though it's, you know, below the ARC max.
Yeah, and Linux, there's actually some callbacks. There's some callbacks I think are supposed to get executed when, like, you know, you're starting an application and uses a lot of pages, and it'll actually call into the ARC to do the eviction there before failing the allocation. But it's possible that those are not working entirely as they should. We definitely have tests, like when George and I did a bunch of work on the ARC eviction a while, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. And that was definitely one of the things that we were looking at is like when you start up a big program, having it actually succeed in starting. And it worked for us at the time, but it could be that this use case is different or that things have changed since then.
I think there was also the recently that we increased the arc max size or the default arc max size in Linux. I don't know if that's kind of contributing to this, but it would be interesting to get to the bottom of that.
I don't know is it the same problem or different, but I have a report from a user of TrueNAS that who has a problem with ARC on Linux, where like ARC eviction getting blocked by waiting for sublist, while I have suspicions that sublist is held by L2ARC write, because L2ARC write I first thought it just traverses a lot of headers, but that should exit at some point. But I also see that it allocates ZIO and buffers and sends ZIO while holding multi-list sublist lock. I suspect there could be deadlock. I just today started looking, maybe drop the lock while we are doing all the allocations. That way it should allow eviction to proceed. Hopefully it will help.
And we should have our prototype of concurrent eviction for the ARC relatively soon. I think we're getting the first testing versions of it happening right now. So evicting from all the sublists concurrently, or multiple sublists concurrently instead of one at a time, so that under this kind of memory pressure where the ARC maybe is already full and you're just trying to make room in it in order to do new reads or writes, or you know, where the system needs some space back, being able to respond much more quickly.
I have a minor request. The release notes for 2.2.3 say it's good up to kernel 6.7. I have a suspicion it's actually being used in 6.8. Could you update notes saying what releases actually are supported?
I don't know what's involved in changing the release notes after the fact. Maybe Tony?
Well, we can change the release notes, but it's still going to have 6.7 in the meta file in the release. So I don't know if it'll allow you to build for 6.7.
6.8's the
My
question.
warn. 6.8, sorry.
There was some pull request or something about this recently, about being able to try anyway or something. I forget what the change was.
I mean, do you believe it's okay for 6.8?
There's pull requests 15805 has 46 changes required to make it work with 6.8.
Okay.
So that's merged into master now, but I that it means it works for 223 yet.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, Michael, I saw your survey. One question is, the dates that you mentioned are weekend of. Are you thinking of having it on a weekend days versus, in the past you've had it on weekdays?
Actually, that's a very good point. It's traditionally been Monday, Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Having just returned from a BSD con that was stuck in my head. Well, let me rephrase that. But yeah,
Maybe to give people the option of do weekends versus weekdays.
yeah, let me add those in there.
Yeah, I think that would be
you're
a
right.
good question because some people weekdays are easier and some people the weekend is better.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
Family commitments, weekends are a little tough.
definitely.
Yeah. And one question kind of along those lines, that where you mentioned the user content, is that covered in the developer, or is that in addition to?
That yeah, that'd be some, I think it. Thank you for helping flesh that out. Go defaulting to the 2 days of developer content, and then the intention is to ask about adding 2 days of user content. So let me
Got it.
rephrase it so it's a lot more clear on that. If I didn't bang it out, it probably wouldn't happen on short notice. So here I am banging out. So
Now you get all this live feedback.
what's that?
Exactly.
Now you
You
get
get
all this
live feedback.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you so much for that. Okay, I will update just that one section on, do these 2 days work for only developer content, or also these 4 days for developer and user content? Cool. And I'm trying to distill several conversations that have taken place to date. So it's like, it's new territory, but I see a lot of potential in this. And thank you for all in advance for your participation in various ways. Go ahead and refresh that in just a minute here.
Cool, thanks.
Sure.
All right. What additional topics do folks have? Great. If there aren't any, then we'll see you in 4 weeks. And I think the next meeting will be at the earlier time, 9 a.m. Pacific. See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.